She had always loved singing, but it wasn't easy to believe in her talent. Growing up in a small town, the people around her didn't understand her passion. It wasn't that they were mean or intentionally hurtful, but it was clear to her that they didn't see the potential she saw in herself. Many of them thought singing was just a hobby, something fun to do in your spare time, but not something you could actually build a future on. It was the kind of place where people stuck to the safe, practical jobs, things that had clear paths and guaranteed outcomes. From a young age, she would sing in her room, alone, with the door closed. She felt a sense of freedom when she sang, as though she could escape from the pressure of being the practical one. But the doubts started creeping in, especially when the people closest to her told her that maybe she should focus on something more stable. They told her that pursuing music full-time wasn't a realistic dream, and that she should consider other options. Despite this, the love for singing never left her. It was always there, bubbling beneath the surface. She didn't want to give up on something that made her feel alive. Every time she heard a song that resonated with her, she imagined herself on stage, performing in front of thousands. But every time she tried to share her dream, the response was always the same, a friendly but dismissive comment, as though her aspirations were a distant fantasy. She kept her dreams to herself and continued to sing when no one was around, honing her voice in secret. There was one person, though, who believed in her, an older woman, a retired singer, who noticed her talent one day. She had heard her singing at a local event, where she was just filling in as a backup singer. The retired singer could see the raw potential in her voice and approached her afterward. She gave her some encouraging words and offered to mentor her. This small act of kindness lit a spark. For the first time, she had someone who not only believed in her but was willing to help her improve. At first, she hesitated. Could she really be good enough? What if this was all just a dream that would never come true? But the more she worked with the retired singer, the more confident she became. The lessons weren't easy. They required patience and hard work, but the progress was undeniable. Slowly but surely, her voice became stronger, more controlled, and more powerful. She practiced every day, pushing herself to improve. But the doubts didn't disappear completely. There were still moments when she questioned herself. Could she ever really compete with others who had years of experience? Would she ever be able to stand on stage and sing for people who might not believe in her at first? These thoughts often made her feel like giving up. However, one evening, something changed. She had been practicing for months, getting better every day, and it was time to take a chance. There was a local charity event that needed someone to perform, and though she wasn't sure she was ready, she decided to sign up. She wasn't expecting much, just a chance to get up there and see what would happen. The event was filled with people she knew, friends, family, and even a few of the people who had doubted her. As she stood backstage, nerves ran through her body. The lights were bright, and the crowd was buzzing with energy. She could feel the weight of all the people who had ever doubted her. But as she stepped onto the stage, something shifted inside her. She took a deep breath and began to sing. The music filled the air, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. It didn't matter what anyone else thought. She was doing what she loved, and that was all that mattered. After that night, something changed within her. Even though she was far from perfect, the experience of performing in front of an audience made her realize that maybe she was more capable than she had believed. The applause, though not overwhelming, was enough to tell her that people had enjoyed her performance. For the first time, she felt like her dream was possible. It wasn't the loud cheers or standing ovation that she had always imagined, but it was a start. That feeling of standing on stage, with the lights shining down on her, was something she couldn't easily forget. However, there was still a long road ahead. The doubt that had been planted in her mind by years of criticism didn't disappear overnight. She wasn't sure if one good performance could change everything, but she also knew that she wasn't going to let that stop her. In the days that followed, she started practicing harder than ever before. She found a new purpose in her music, Every note she sang, every technique she mastered, felt like a small victory. But the journey wasn't always smooth. There were times when she doubted herself, especially when she was faced with setbacks. Every time she had to compete or perform, there was a voice in the back of her head that reminded her of the people who didn't believe in her. But she also found something else during those times of doubt. She found a new mentor. An older woman who had once been a professional singer and now spent her days teaching aspiring artists, took her under her wing. The woman had seen something in her performance at the charity event and offered to help her improve. It was like a sign that her journey wasn't just about her hard work. It was about having the right people around her to guide her when she felt lost. At first, she didn't know if she was good enough to work with someone so experienced. The mentor's voice echoed in her mind. If you want to be great, you have to believe in yourself first. You already have the talent. What you need now is discipline. Those words stayed with her every day as she trained, pushing herself to become better, not just for herself, but for those who believed in her. Her mentor gave her countless tips about controlling her breathing, maintaining vocal strength, and using her emotions to enhance the song. For weeks, she worked relentlessly. Her mentor was tough but fair, and at times she found herself feeling frustrated. Some days, the progress felt too slow, and she questioned whether it was worth all the effort. But each time she wanted to give up, she remembered why she started. Singing wasn't just about performing for others. It was a way for her to express who she was. It was a part of her that she couldn't hide anymore. Then one day, after months of preparation, an opportunity came her way. There was a national competition, and she was invited to audition. It was a huge moment. The nerves returned, and for a moment she thought about backing out. But she knew this was her chance to prove to herself that she wasn't just dreaming anymore. She was ready. The night of the audition, she was nervous, but she stepped onto the stage with confidence. Her heart raced as she sang, but this time, it was different. She didn't just sing, she felt every word, every note. It was as if her voice had transformed. She could hear the emotion in her own singing, something that felt deep within her soul. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply being herself, and that was enough. Only the moment she finished her audition, a strange silence filled the room. She stood there, breathless, as the judges exchanged glances. Her heart was pounding, and for a second, she wondered if she had made a mistake. But then, one of the judges spoke up. That was something special, they said, their voice filled with surprise and admiration. The other judges nodded in agreement, and for the first time, she felt like she had truly been seen. As the days passed, she couldn't help but replay the moment over and over in her mind. She had entered that room unsure of what to expect, but she had left it with something more important than a simple compliment. She had left with a sense of belief. No matter what happened next, she had proven to herself that her voice was worthy of being heard. She realized then that her journey wasn't about waiting for others to believe in her. It was about believing in herself. The news of her audition spread quickly, and soon she was getting calls from all sorts of places. People were beginning to take notice. She was invited to sing at various events, some local and others much bigger, but the invitations didn't always feel like victories. At times they felt like an added weight, a pressure she didn't feel ready for. Every time she took the stage, she wondered if she was good enough, or if she would let everyone down. But, slowly, something inside her began to shift. She started to realize that she wasn't alone in feeling nervous or unsure. Every artist, no matter how experienced, had their own battles with doubt. And with each performance, she became more comfortable in her own skin. The nerves didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled her. She learned to embrace them, understanding that they were part of the process. It wasn't long before the biggest test of all came. She was asked to perform at a prestigious national event. This was the opportunity that could open doors to a professional career, the kind she had always dreamed of. The stakes were higher than ever, and as the date of the performance approached, her anxiety grew. What if she wasn't ready? What if she let everyone down? These thoughts filled her mind as she prepared, but her mentor's words kept echoing in her head. You've come this far because you've worked hard. Trust yourself. On the day of the event, she felt the weight of the moment. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her as she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding her for a moment. Her hands trembled and her throat tightened. But as soon as the music began, something amazing happened. All the fears and doubts melted away, and she was left with nothing but the music and the moment. She felt like she had finally found her voice, the one she had been searching for all these years. As she sang, she didn't focus on how others might perceive her. Instead, she sang for herself, letting the music take over. The song became an extension of who she was, and for the first time, she felt completely connected to it. The audience, once silent, began to respond. The applause was louder than she had ever imagined, and it didn't stop when she finished. People stood and cheered, and for the first time in her life, she realized something important. It wasn't about their approval. It was about her own belief in herself and her voice. In the days that followed, her world began to change. She received more invitations, more recognition, and soon her dream of a music career felt like a reality. But the journey didn't end there. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more doubts to face, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned that the greatest obstacle was not the people who doubted her, but the doubts she had within herself. And now, she was ready to face them all head on. As the weeks went by, the success from her performance began to take root. She was receiving more opportunities to perform at local events, and even larger venues began reaching out. Each new invitation felt like another test, but this time it was different. Instead of feeling the weight of expectations pressing down on her, she started to see each performance as a chance to grow. Still, the doubt lingered. It wasn't the doubt of her ability to sing. It was a deeper uncertainty. Would people continue to believe in her? Would they think she was just a one-time wonder? She could see the way people looked at her after the applause died down. They saw the potential in her, but the pressure was mounting. Was she ready to be the person they all thought she could be? Could she live up to the image they had in their minds? These questions circled in her head constantly, making it difficult to simply enjoy the success she had earned. For a long time, she questioned whether she was truly cut out for a career in music, or if she was just trying to fulfill a dream that others had for her. The people closest to her, however, had a different perspective. They were proud of how far she had come, but even they still had their reservations. Some told her to keep going, to pursue her dreams with everything she had. Others, though, couldn't help but ask whether she had made the right decision in dedicating herself so completely to a path with no guarantees. These mixed feelings left her torn. She wanted to keep going, but at the same time she wondered if she had any right to ask for more. Could she expect people to support her dreams forever? Or would they eventually tire of her ambitions? But despite the doubts, she knew she couldn't stop now. The more she performed, the more she realized how much she loved it. Singing wasn't just a career choice, it was who she was. The joy she felt when she stepped on stage, the way the music flowed through her. It was like nothing else in the world. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. She knew this was what she was meant to do, but the fear of failure still held her back. What if it was all too much? What if she couldn't handle the constant scrutiny and expectation? There was a particular moment that stayed with her, a performance that tested her more than any other. It was a huge event with a very distinguished audience. The nerves were overwhelming. She had never felt so much pressure. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience wasn't impressed? But she pushed through, focusing on her breath and remembering the techniques her mentor had taught her. When the music started, it felt like time slowed down. Her hands shook at first, but then, as the song began, everything fell into place. She wasn't just singing the words, she was telling her story, pouring every emotion she had into the music. When she finished, there was silence. It felt like an eternity. Then the applause came. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was genuine admiration. The people in the audience had connected with her, and in that moment she realized something important. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong or even winning approval. It was about sharing her truth, her passion, with the world. The event marked a turning point. It wasn't the applause or the recognition that mattered most. It was the realization that she had finally embraced who she was. The doubts that had once held her back no longer had the same power. She wasn't trying to live up to anyone else's expectations anymore. She was singing for herself, and that she knew was enough. As more performances came, the pressure continued to build. But now she faced it with a new sense of confidence. She knew that no matter what anyone else thought, she was doing what she loved. The doubts would always be there, but they no longer had control over her. The real victory, she realized, was in her own belief. And as long as she kept that, there was nothing she couldn't overcome. As time went on, the music industry started to notice her. She received an invitation to audition for a national competition, a platform that could potentially change everything. At first, it felt like a dream. She had worked so hard, but now the stakes were higher than ever. This was the big chance she had been waiting for, the moment that could prove to herself and the world that her dreams were more than just dreams. But as the day of the audition approached, the pressure weighed heavily on her. She couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that had followed her for so long. What if she wasn't ready for something this big? What if the judges didn't see her potential? All those fears started to flood her mind again. But deep down, she knew this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let fear hold her back now. The night before the audition, she could barely sleep. She went over every song, every note, practicing until her throat felt sore. But no matter how much she practiced, the fear of not being good enough stayed with her. The next morning, she woke up feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew she had to give it her all, no matter what. This wasn't just about the competition. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of making it. She didn't just want to perform. She wanted to show the world who she really was. When she arrived at the audition, the nerves hit her all over again. The room was filled with talented people, many of whom had more experience than her. For a moment, she considered turning around and walking out. But she didn't. She took a deep breath, reminded herself of all the hard work she had put in, and walked into the audition room. As she stood in front of the judges, her heart pounded in her chest. But when the music started, something incredible happened. The nerves didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled her. She found herself lost in the music, fully immersed in the song, as if nothing else in the world mattered. When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment. She held her breath, waiting for the judges' reaction. Then, one of the judges spoke, and their words caught her off guard. "You have something special," they said. The other judges nodded in agreement. They were impressed, not just with her voice, but with the emotion and authenticity she brought to the performance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that's what stood out. As she left the room, a sense of relief washed over her. No matter what happened next, she had done her best. She had faced her fears, stepped outside her comfort zone, and given everything she had. The doubt that had once held her back was slowly beginning to fade. She realized that she didn't need to be perfect to succeed. She just needed to be true to herself. In the days that followed, she waited for the results with a mix of hope and anxiety. The fear of rejection was always there, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned that no matter what, she was worthy of the opportunity, just as much as anyone else. And when the phone call finally came, she was overjoyed to hear that she had been selected to move forward in the competition. The next stage of the competition was even more intense, but she felt ready. She had proven to herself that she could handle whatever came her way. Each new challenge was a chance to grow, to push herself even further. And for the first time, she wasn't doing it for anyone else. She was doing it for herself, to prove that she was capable of achieving her dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed at the beginning. As the competition continued, things started to feel more real. She was no longer just someone auditioning for a chance. She was now a contender, and the pressure felt different. Each round brought a new challenge, a new song to master, and new expectations to meet. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, she began to embrace the pressure. She realized that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing what she had always dreamed of. The journey had been long, but each step had brought her closer to her true self. And now, standing in front of a live audience and performing on national television, she knew this was just the beginning. The people around her had noticed the change. Her mentor was proud, but there was a quiet confidence about her that hadn't been there before. She wasn't the same person who had once doubted herself at every turn. The lessons and all the work she had put in were starting to pay off, but with that confidence came even more pressure. The farther she went in the competition, the more people began to talk about her. There were whispers of her being the one to beat, and she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. Could she live up to the expectations that were now being placed on her? The weight of it all hit her hardest during one of the final rounds. The song she had to perform was one she had never done before, a genre she wasn't entirely familiar with. The challenge seemed impossible. She was out of her comfort zone, and for a moment, self-doubt crept in again. What if she couldn't do it? What if the pressure got to her? But as the day of the performance approached, she reminded herself of everything she had already overcome. She had faced rejection, criticism, and her own doubts. Yet here she was, still standing and still fighting. This was her chance to show the world, not just the judges, but herself as well, that she was capable of anything. She threw herself into preparation, practicing every day, sometimes for hours at a time. It was grueling, and there were moments when she felt like giving up. But deep down, she knew that the only way out was through. There was no other option but to give it her all, and that's exactly what she did. On the night of the performance, her nerves were high, but there was something different this time. She felt more in control. When the music started, she didn't just sing, she let go. She allowed the music to carry her, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't focused on what anyone else thought. She sang the song with everything she had, not trying to be perfect, but being true to herself. The audience could feel it. They could see how much she had grown, how much she had transformed. When the final note left her lips and the music faded, there was a brief moment of silence before the crowd erupted into applause. She stood there, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about winning the competition anymore. It wasn't even about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving to herself that she could do it. The judges were impressed, of course, but it was the look in her mentor's eyes that meant the most. She had done it. She had pushed through every doubt, every challenge, and had come out stronger. No matter what happened next, she knew she had already won. As the competition continued and more opportunities arose, she realized that the most important thing wasn't the applause or the recognition. It was the journey, the way she had grown, the way she had found herself in the process. And she knew, no matter where life took her, that she would never stop singing, because now she had truly found her voice. As her journey continued, everything seemed to move faster than she could process. The success from the competition led to even more incredible opportunities. Invitations to perform at major events began to pour in, and before long, she found herself traveling to places she had only dreamed of. The stages she stood on were bigger, the crowds louder, and the pressure higher than ever before. But despite all the attention and recognition, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: the music. Through it all, there were still moments of doubt. It was impossible to ignore the whispers of the critics, and the pressure of constantly being in the spotlight. The expectations were always there, hovering in the background, and there were times when she felt overwhelmed. But she had come a long way from the shy, uncertain person who once doubted her own voice. Now, she was ready to face whatever came her way. The more she performed, the more she realized that success wasn't just about singing on big stages or receiving applause. It was about the connection she had with her audience. Each performance was a chance to share a piece of herself with the world, and with every show, she felt a deeper connection to the music, a connection she had always longed for, but never fully understood until now. The applause didn't matter as much as the way she could see people in the crowd truly feeling the music. That's what kept her going. She had also learned to trust herself more than ever before. The self-doubt that had once held her back wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled her. She understood now that doubt was a part of the journey, not the end of it. Everyone, even the most successful artists, had to face their inner struggles. The difference was how you dealt with them. She had learned to face her doubts head-on and use them to fuel her growth, rather than letting them keep her stuck. Over time, she began to build a community of people who supported and believed in her, people who had been with her since the beginning, and new people who had discovered her music. They were not just fans, they were people who truly understood the journey she had been on, and that meant everything. It was a reminder that she didn't have to do it alone. There were people who saw her as more than just a voice. They saw her as someone who had worked tirelessly to get where she was. And then came the moment she had always dreamed of, a record deal. It wasn't something she had expected to happen so quickly, but it was the culmination of all the hard work and belief she had poured into her music. Signing that contract felt like a milestone, but it also felt like the start of something even bigger. She had always dreamed of recording her own music and sharing it with the world, and now she was about to make that dream a reality. As she entered the studio for her first recording session, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. There were so many moments when she had almost given up, when the doubts had seemed too loud to ignore. But she had kept going, kept pushing forward. Now, as she stood in the studio, with a microphone in front of her and the music flowing through her, she knew she had made the right choice. The journey had taught her more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about finding success. It was about finding herself. She had discovered what it meant to truly believe in her abilities, to trust her voice, and to embrace the challenges that came with chasing a dream. No matter where her career took her, she knew that the most important thing was to stay true to herself and the music that had always been her guiding light. Looking ahead, there was no telling what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was ready. She had finally found her place. And it was a place where she could be herself, where she could sing, share her story, and make an impact on the world. And no matter how big the stages got, or how many people listened, she would always remember the journey that brought her here. The doubts, the fears, the hard work, they had all been worth it. She had found her voice, and that was just the beginning.